everyone, it's Maddie.
I'm V and welcome to our July wrap-up.
We did participate in the booktubeathon a little bit and managed to complete our goal of reading all 7 books in the 2 days we participated in, so we'll make sure to leave links to those vlogs in the description if you want to find out about the books that we read then.
We've also done a ton of uni reading, but we don't really want to talk about those in our wrap-up, so if you're interested in what we are reading for our modules for 3rd year, you can follow us on Goodreads. So let's get to it. I finally got round to Wing Jones by Katherine Webber, and this is the story of Wing, who after her brother's accident discovers a passion for running that just might save her family. I adored this book. Maddie did a whole 5-star review of it, which I will leave in the cards because I agree with absolutely everything she said.
I started the month with Truth or Dare by Non Pratt, and I've already done an entire separate review on my feelings on the ace representation in this, so we'll leave a link to that in the cards. But as for the book in general, I really enjoyed it. It's different from Non Pratt's other books because she's done 2 perspectives before, but never one after the other. So this is a flip book. You read Claire's perspective first, and then Seth's. Because of this order, I felt like I connected with Claire way more, and especially because a lot of Seth's storylines happen in her story too, it was a little bit hard to stay connected to the story. But the most exciting thing about this is that Claire and Seth start a YouTube channel, and all the representation of YouTube itself and making videos and the interactions that you get from other people online was really authentic, and I loved that it played a big part in this book because it plays a big part in a lot of people's lives, so it should be more prominent really.
Next I have Counting Stars by Keris Stainton, and this is the story of Anna who moves halfway across the country to room with a bunch of 18 to 20-year-olds that are about to go to university. In her flat share, she meets a bunch of friends and you kind of follow all of them. As for Anna, she has a YouTube channel that she's trying to keep a secret whilst also falling in love with one of her flatmates. I'm pretty sure there's also a mystery in relation to her dad, but I read this one so long ago and it didn't leave too much of an impression on me that I can't quite remember. Unlike Truth or Dare, I didn't think the YouTube rep was quite as prominent as it should have been in this story, but I did like the inclusion of her transcripts of the videos, even if they were ridiculously short. What I did like most about this story though was the age group that it focused on, so if you feel like you're missing on the older voices of YA, then I definitely give this one a go.
Next, I finally read Vendetta by Catherine Doyle, which is the first book in the Blood for Blood trilogy. This is one that we actually got in our haul at the beginning of 2016, so this was a long time coming, but I'm really pleased that I read it because so many of my friends have glowing things to say about the series. This tells the story of Sophie, whose parents are in jeopardy when a new family enters their small town, which includes 5 teenage boys. Luckily, not all of them are interested in Sophie. There's only one that she finds as a love interest, Nick, but he is mysterious and doesn't want to be part of her world because it's too dangerous. And so I was getting Twilight vibes from this and the Vampire Diaries as well, because there's also a mysterious older brother to Nick called Luca. So while this was kind of tropey for a burst book, it's kind of expected with a story like this. But what I did like about how the book progressed as well was the fact that it had such genuine threat. I think to have characters that are part of the mafia, you've got to have something a little bit more serious and life-threatening rather than just empty words, and this definitely delivered on that. The only problem I had with it was a slight quibble with the disability relation to villainy, and that kind of knocked a star off my rating.
Next I have No Filter by Orlagh Collins, and this is the story of Emerald, who goes to Ireland for the summer and gets into a relationship with Liam against her parents' wishes, very Romeo and Juliet style. Emerald is also highly connected to social media. She loves Instagram and relates a lot of her life to the different Instagram filters. I know I've seen some complaints from people saying that it's already outdated because Instagram had an update or something, but I think if you have liked Instagram in the past, whatever incarnation, then you'd probably like this story. I wouldn't give it any more than 3 stars, but that's just because contemporary romance isn't really my favourite genre, but if you are looking for your next summery read just before the autumn, then I'd recommend adding this one to your TBR.
Next, I read Noah Can't Even by Simon James Green, which is all about Noah, who thinks he should get in a relationship with Sophie, the most popular girl in school, in order to up his street cred, but at a party ends up kissing his best friend Harry, and so his feelings are really confused. That's all it tells you on the blurb, but so much more happens in this book that's silly and ridiculous and kind of like a soap opera that it's unbelievable. It's because of all of that, and the fact that this wasn't as positively LGBT as I wanted it to, that I could only give this one 2 stars. I wasn't clicking with the writing and the way the story was unfolding, and how Harry's character wasn't super prominent even though he was the one I was most interested in. I think this is going to be a series, and I don't know if I'd want to continue it, but so many things have happened in this one already that I don't really think I'd miss out by not seeing the second. And it has been optioned for a TV show, which I can totally see happening because that's definitely the vibes I was getting from this one.
Next I have Stargazing for Beginners by Sarah McLaughlin. This is the story of Meg, and all she wants to do is go into space. Then her mum goes on a surprise holiday, leaving Meg to look after her younger sister and her granddad, and she suddenly has to crash back down to Earth. I really enjoyed this story. I thought it was a 3.5 star, mostly because it has a slightly younger tone to it. It's almost as if if Jacqueline Wilson had written a YA novel, but it was cute and I really loved reading about a female character that was interested in STEM subjects. The romance also wasn't overly heavy, which I can definitely appreciate, and I liked the family values it had too. Meg doesn't really get on with her younger sister, who is like an actual child of about 3 or 4, so it's a difficult relationship to have when Meg is 16, but I liked how that developed, so if you have a large age gap between siblings, you would probably really like this.
Next, we both read The Loneliest Girl in the Universe by Lauren James, and this was one of our most anticipated releases of the year, and it totally paid off. This was such a fantastic, romantic, psychological thriller set in space. It follows Romy, who is the only girl aboard a spaceship because both of her parents died, and she hasn't let anyone out of hypersleep yet. She's travelling to a planet that scientists think is really similar to Earth, and suddenly she gets a transmission from a different ship saying that he's following her there and there's one boy on board. And so it follows their relationship across emails and across time, because there's a huge difference in where they are and how fast they can communicate, which was really fascinating. You get to learn more about the backstory of what happened to Romy's parents and what's happening on Earth, and everything is just given to you at exactly the right pace that you're almost close to working it out for yourself, but you need that extra push from Lauren to really make it click. Towards the end, it just gets so cinematic and crazy. I literally couldn't put the book down, and I also wanted to be in the room with someone else because it was that atmospheric. It's so different from anything Lauren has written before because it has a really creepy vibe at the same time, and a gasp fell out of my mouth at one point. So this was fantastic, and she told us at Yalk that she's potentially writing a sequel to this, which would be really, really fun because I think she could go so many places with Romy. It's definitely the most accomplished and well-plotted book I've read the entire year, and probably one we're going to be talking about a lot because we both gave this 5 stars.
Becoming Betty by Eleanor Wood is about Lizzie, who is moving from her secondary school to sixth form away from her friends. At the new school, Lizzie meets Vivi, who encourages her to change her identity to Betty so that she can join their rock band and become someone new. I have to say, I felt the voices in this story were a lot younger than they were supposed to be. Lizzie is around 17 and yet she felt about 15, and Vivi, who's supposed to be 18 or 19, actually felt about 12. It also doesn't have any chapter divisions. There are only a few text messages breaking up the prose, which I found personally difficult to get through because I like to have that accomplishment of chapter reaching. But overall, it's about finding out who you are and ignoring the people that are trying to push you in one direction when you actually might want to go in a different one. There are also some weird LGBT undertones which I didn't think were fully realised and therefore done a little bit incorrectly, in the sense that some things that were said made me feel uncomfortable. And I almost feel like this book could warrant a sequel because I'm definitely interested in what happens next.
Next is Another Place by Matthew Crowe, which tells the story of Claudette, who's recently come home after being hospitalised for depression. She's had quite a long time away from school and she's returning to a mystery. A girl that she was closer to than everyone thinks, Sarah, goes missing, and Claudette takes it upon herself to try and find out what happened. I thought that this had a really genuine friendship between Claudette and Sarah, and also her best friend from school, and really genuinely represents the more criminal characters of YA, because I've seen that kind of click before, but I've always thought that it's been more words than actions. But this definitely had me believing in the dangers of this small town. I thought it was so excellently written, and the book is planned out in like 4 or 5 parts where you learn more about Sarah with each one, and more about Claudette as well, as she talks about her past and her depression and how that's playing into her life now. I ended up giving this one 4 stars because I went in knowing very little about the book and came out really surprised with how accomplished it was.
Ink by Alice Broadway is the first dystopian story I have read in a really long time. It's about a world where your sins are inked onto your skin, and when Lenora's father dies, she has to come to terms with his suddenly not so secret past that throws the whole community into disarray. Ink is a really slow burn, and it does commit 2 sins that I really dislike in books, including rewriting fairy tales that already exist in our world so it kind of becomes unnecessary to explain them, and dream sequences. Despite that, I did really enjoy Ink. It's incredibly slow paced and on the whole felt more like a prologue to a more exciting sequel. The ending had me shook, my jaw was on the floor, and I cannot wait to get my hands on the sequel because I think it's just going to be action packed and we're really rolling in the story now. It's finally got its momentum. I didn't think that the dramatic irony was really working in this story because the reader knows way more than Lenora the whole time, which meant I'd pieced together practically the whole mystery until the shock reveals at the very end. But it was probably one of the best dystopians anyway, perfect for fans of Melinda Salisbury.
Next, I read Lumberjane's Unicorn Power by Mariko Tamaki, and this is Lumberjane's in novel form. It's not rewriting one of the graphic novel tales, but it's completely original and takes all of the characters that you know and love, and I think you could situate it in between the 3rd and 4th volume. This is really fun because I hope it introduces Lumberjanes to a new audience. They're just such kick-ass girls, all with completely different personalities, and so there's always one that you can connect to, and they're fun and adventurous, and definitely not falling into any stereotypes. I think you would have potential to pick this one up as your first foray into the Lumberjanes universe, but I would recommend reading the first graphic novel because it gives you an introduction to all of the characters, and you don't really get much of that in this book.
Next, I DNF'd Daughter of the Burning City by Amanda Foody. I got around 50% through. This is about the character who has the ability to create illusions that exist in the real world in a corporal form, and then suddenly her illusions, which she considers her family, start to be picked off by a murderer. I was generally confused about the logic of the whole magic system because I kept thinking, just make a new one, it's not like you've lost the power. And I felt like although it was really setting up this whole excitement and it's in a circus fantasy world, which I normally enjoy, I didn't find it intriguing, I wasn't interested enough to continue, so for something that was supposed to be suspenseful, just really didn't have me hooked.
Next, I read Wolfe by Wolfe by Ryan Graudin, which I was so excited to get to because it's actually one that my whole family has read but me, because it had huge hype when it first came out. I thought that this was so original for a plot. It's about Yale, who's a skin shifter, and in order to kill Hitler as part of the resistance in this alternate universe where Germany won the war, she has to participate in a motorcycle race and win in order to get close to the Führer. She takes the identity of a previous winner, Adele, and with that comes a lot of other troubles for her that make the biggest obstacles in the book, as she has to navigate the relationships that Adele was keeping on that she might not have been able to know about in her research. While the plot was exciting and action-packed and really kept me hooked, it was the relationships and the slow reveal of Yale's backstory that kept me reading the most. I felt like all the character relationships were really nuanced, and this book was so well plotted, you could just tell that Ryan Graudin probably planned it out from the very first sentence to the last. I am beyond excited to get to the second book, and we actually have a physical copy now, so that's definitely going to be one of the books that I'm going to read in August. I have to know what happens, the ending was too good.
Next I have probably my favourite read of the month, and that is The Dark Days Club by Alison Goodman. This is basically a Regency romance except with demons. I really did not like The Infernal Devices by Cassandra Clare, and that is absolutely no secret, so I didn't know how I'd feel about this because it's pretty much the same vibes, right? But no, it's so much better in my opinion. So I would say similarly, if you didn't like The Infernal Devices, or if you loved it beyond belief, then give this one a go because it's highly underrated. I adored like the first 200 pages where it's setting the scene and the historical world building is excellent, and I was just so invested in the characters. That whole 200 pages by itself I would give 5 stars. Then it gets slightly more info dumpy as we learn more about the demons and the world and the prophecies, and that got kind of tedious, so I only knocked a star off, giving it 4 stars because of that. However, the ending was really exciting and I thought it was action-packed. There was death, there was betrayal, there was romance. It was really great in the last 100 pages, so I am so pumped for the sequel that I need to get my hands on immediately.
Next, we both read There's Someone Inside Your House by Stephanie Perkins, which is her Scream Queens-esque story that's meant to be so different from Anna and the French Kiss. But there's still a huge romantic or more lusty thread in this story, which probably means that a fan of her original trilogy would enjoy this story just as much. This is the story of a psychotic killer who's going around butchering the most popular or successful kids at McCartney's school, and it's up to her and her outcast love interest Ollie to try and figure out who's doing it and protect the rest of the student body. What's absolutely ridiculous about this book though is that they figure out who's done it at 60% through the book, and it's a short book, and so for the rest of the book they try and like pen this guy in and approach him with such reason as if he hasn't been killing people. They make some pretty stupid decisions and put themselves in danger when they really didn't need to, and so I couldn't get past that. They just weren't being logical about the whole situation. If you don't want to read this because it's horror but you do because you love Stephanie Perkins, then we'd recommend just skipping over all of the bits that look like it's not going to be focusing on McCartney. Just assume that someone's going to get killed at the end of that 3-page bit. If you want to see our more in-depth thoughts on this book, we did post a review on our blog and give details of some of the plot threads that we thought went a little bit underdeveloped. So in the end, we actually only gave this one 2 stars.
Next I have Remix by Non Pratt, and this is the story of Kaz and Ruby, who go together to a festival, but then they split up throughout the majority of the time, which I was quite disappointed in because I was ready for some female friendship. They're both following their paths related to ex-boyfriends or new boyfriends and just discovering themselves and who they are outside of a relationship. I found this one pretty difficult to read because it chops between Ruby and Kaz's perspective very quickly. Sometimes in the middle of a conversation, you'll have a paragraph of Ruby and then a paragraph of Kaz. So I would have preferred more structure if it was more of like a chapter alternate situation, because it felt like I was never inhabiting one girl's head for long enough. Still, it was a very short and summery contemporary that I did end up enjoying.
Next we have Revel of the Sands by Alwyn Hamilton, and this was one that I picked for the booktubeathon, but it was one that I ended up just picking up and putting down throughout the week, so it took me a while to finish, but I'm really pleased that I did, and I'm so pumped to get to the sequel, even though it's twice as long, because I think it's going to be twice as action-packed. It was so interesting to read about a Middle Eastern inspired fantasy. Aladdin was always my favourite Disney movie when I was a kid, and so I've always felt a little draw to stories like that, and so this just satisfied that little like 8-year-old girl that really liked that world. One thing I will say about this book though is that the first chapter is the best first chapter of a book I've ever read. It had me so hooked with each sentence, it felt perfectly crafted. So if you're ever in a bookshop, I just recommend reading the first couple of pages because you'll want to pick it up after that.
Next, I finally read Fearsome Dreamer by Laure, which has been on TBRs of mine for probably the last 2 or 3 years. It's a mix of techno and historical fantasy in a world where people with special abilities can move locations in their dreams. That's like the most reduced form of the plot, as it's very complicated and it has multiple perspectives, and they all kind of jar against each other, but in a very convincing and entertaining way. I really liked the latter half of this story where it sort of turns into a magical boarding school story. I'm really pumped to read the sequel, The Illusionist, so hopefully I'll get around to that in August, but I might need to try and find a more detailed synopsis because by now I've probably forgotten more of the intricate details that I will definitely rely on in the second book.
Finally for me is Freshers by Tom Ellen and Lucy Ivison, and this is guaranteed to make it to my favourite books of the year list because I connected with it and actually laughed out loud so many times while reading, and that never happens to me. I've actually tabbed little bits that I found so hilarious so that I could find them again and easily laugh. This is about Phoebe and Luke, and Phoebe is really excited about going to university, and she knows Luke from her secondary school, but they never really communicated there. They meet during a freshers party and then connect throughout the school year and get to know each other and each other's friendship groups. I loved every single character in this, not just Phoebe and Luke, but all the minor characters and their roommates and best friends all had such unique personalities and senses of humour that it just felt like a sitcom, and I wanted to stay with these characters for all 3 years of university, so please let there be a sequel to this. I loved it so much. There is a romance thread in this, but I'd say the emphasis is more on identity and discovering yourself in this completely new location where you have no idea who you're going to be and how it could form you into the adult you'd be for the rest of your life. There were so many passages in this that I thought spoke perfectly to the university experience, so if you're just going to university or have been and want to relive it in the most perfect and hilarious manner, then I definitely recommend picking up Freshers.
Lastly, I have The Girl's Guide to Summer, which is alternately titled in the US as I See London, I See France. It's by Sarah Milnowski, and I've read pretty much everything she's written, so I still wanted to read this one. A travel story about 2 friends from the US who go to Europe for the summer. This is a big problem for our main character, however, because she's kind of the primary carer of her mum, who suffers from agoraphobia very intensely. She's worried about leaving her sister in charge of her mum because she's not sure that she can handle it, as her sister very much takes a backseat in the whole situation. But she also needs to learn what it's like to live on her own and see what is happening in other parts of the world, to pursue her interests and find out what she wants to do with the rest of her life. So she takes the opportunity to go with her best friend, who was originally going to go with her boyfriend until they broke up. When they get to Europe, however, they run into this ex-boyfriend and then things start to go wrong. I thought the pacing of this story was completely off, and because I haven't got any personal interest in travel, when they were going to all of these different locations, I didn't feel excited about them. But if you have gone on similar travels yourself, you will probably really relate to this story and be able to laugh at all of the things that go wrong to them, because I'm sure if you have, similar things will have happened to you. So I only gave this one 2 stars, although I really enjoyed the representation of mental health in parents, because that's something you don't normally see.
So these are all the books that we read in July.
Thank you everyone so much for watching, and we'll see you on our next video.
Bye!